What's up guys, today we're going to be finally going over the new chill inhibitor, the stasis heavy GL from the dungeon, going over its DPS, total damage, comparing it to some of the best 120s in the game, and seeing if it is the new DPS King in Destiny 2, and at the very end of the video, talking about why the god roll is basically impossible to get. So starting off with the left column perks, there's going to be two choices. First, the new perk Envious Arsenal, where dealing damage with both our weapons before readying this weapon refills it from reserves. This is going to be more or less the new auto-loading for this GL, and its big benefit compared to auto-loading is that it has no cooldown at all. As fast as you can do damage with your other two weapons, it will reload the heavy and be ready to go. And when we pair that with bait and switch in the right, where we have to get hits with our two weapons anyways, this combo makes a lot of sense and is one of the best combos in the game. The other choice will be Cascade Point, to greatly increase the rate of fire of the weapon when we land sustained precision hits with a different weapon. Usually for this, you want to use a 140 RPM sniper. Snipers take 2 hits to proc Cascade Point, 140 shoot the fastest, and this will give us max DPS, but give us no built-in way to avoid reloading with the weapon. So there's going to be a lot of give and take between those two perks. And we'll kind of wrap back around to that conversation later in the video, but now moving on to the right column. First up, we have Chill Clip, where direct hits with the top half of the magazine will slow the target, and like all weapons in the game, it's going to take 2 hits with Chill Clip to freeze the target. Third shot will shatter them and do more damage, and the shatter damage. And within the 1 mag of 8, you can actually freeze them twice, and even at max rate of fire, same thing. So not too bad, but probably not as good as other damage perks on the weapon. We're going to compare them all here in a bit. Next perk is on B, Bait and Switch, the old classic. Dealing damage with the other two equipped weapons will give this weapon a 30% buff with enhanced for 11 seconds. And as we mentioned, this paired with Envious Arsenal makes a lot of sense, because you're going to have to land hits with our two weapons to proc Bait and Switch and get that 30% buff, and when you reapply it, it will reload the weapon. And we also have Explosive Light, where picking up orbs will give up to 7 Explosive Light shots with enhanced. And these ones will greatly increase the explosion damage of the GL and actually be one of the highest damage perks on the weapon. And finally, we have Surrounded, where while surrounded by 3 more enemies, you'll get a 35% increase on GLs with the hands up to like 41-ish%. The numbers are different for the explosion and impact numbers. And if we compare all of the damage numbers with this GL, Chill Clip over the mag was roughly a 16% average. Bait and Switch is 30%. Surrounded is going to be the next highest at almost 44, and Explosive Light is going to be a little bit over 44.5. So between these 4 perks, Chill Clip just really isn't worth it. Bait and Switch is going to be the best all around, very easy to proc and have up at all times. Surrounded could be the best in the right situation where you can be surrounded for the boss fight, so probably worth holding onto a good surrounded roll if you get one along the way while farming for Bait and Switch. And the same I would say for Explosive Light. Explosive Light will be the highest DPS over 1 mag. And in the right situation, you could try to make it work for multiple mags, if not the entire reserves of the weapon, by creating a bunch of orbs all over the place. Maybe go with like Attrition Orbs GL. But Explosive Light and Surrounded, even though they're the highest damage buffs on the weapon, they're both going to be very situational. And overall, Bait and Switch will be by far the most reliable and go-to damage perk on this weapon. And before we move on to total damage and DPS, yes, you need spike grenades on this GL for 2 reasons. First, it's the only magazine perk that will directly increase the damage of the weapon. And with 150 RPMs, the base mag is 6 with either spike or no spike. And with backup mag, it will go up to 8. And even if you have something like Augmented Drum, I'll take the mag up to 8 and does not stack with backup mag and stays at 8. So there's no reason not to use spike. It gives you the max magazine of 8 and increases the damage. And if you don't know how spike works, generally, you want the lowest blast radius as possible. Blast radius is tied to the ratio of explosive to impact damage. The higher the blast radius, the more the ratio is in the explosion damage. And with spike increasing the impact damage, if you technically want to min-max a few percent on this weapon, you want the lowest blast radius as possible with spike grenades. So comparing this 150 RPM to some of the great 120s we have in the game, once again looking at the Bait and Switch numbers on the chill inhibitor, and now with the edge transit, which is a 120, adding those numbers up, the 150 hits for 69.2 thousand and the 120 hits for 80.3 thousand, which is 16 0.1% more per shot. But now the question is the total reserves of these weapons. With the 150, it goes from 33 to 35 to 37, and then finally 38. And then with the 120, it goes from 26 to 27 to 29 and 30. And we add up the total damage of these weapons. As you see, the 150s are higher by roughly 200,000, about 10%, the entire way between no reserves, 1 reserve, 2 reserves, and 3 reserves. So 150s are just better across the board for total damage. And we also look at the rate of fire on these weapons. It's going to take quite a while. We're going to do 3 mags, which is going to be 28 shots with the 150. Then with the 120, that's going to be 21 shots. And look at all that good stuff. If we compare the DPS of 1, 2, and 3 mags, they are very close across the board. The 120 is slightly higher over 1 mag, but then the 150 is higher over the 2 and 3. But these numbers are so close that they're really not that much of a difference. So overall, in terms of the DPS and total damage of these weapons, I would have to say 150s are slightly better just because of the higher total damage. Their DPS are very, very similar. But the thing about GLs and rockets in this game is you're generally trying not to actually ever reload them, and that is where the left column perks on these weapons come into play. As we mentioned on the new chill inhibitor, we have a left column perk of Envious Arsenal to avoid reloading, and we'll be able to take advantage of that 1 mag DPS number almost all the time and never actually have to reload the weapon. If we compare that to some of the options on the great 120s with bait and switch, we have things like auto loading left, which for most situations, auto loading and Envious Arsenal will be basically the same. The benefit of Envious Arsenal is that there is no cooldown or wait time on it. As fast as you can do damage with our 2 weapons, you can reload the GL. Compared to auto loading, you will always have to wait that time. And depending on what you're using in your combo, you know, it might not be quick enough. So overall, I would say Envious Arsenal is better than auto loading, but for a lot of situations, they're going to be more or less the same. And the other left column perk that both the chill inhibitor and the edge transit have is going to be Cascade Point to greatly increase the rate of fire of the weapon. And for this, like we mentioned, you generally want to use a sniper. 140s are the best. I usually use Cloud Strike. And looking at that, the rate of fire is going to be a lot higher on these weapons. So first with the 150, getting 2 hits with the Cloud Strike, shooting off all 8 shots now only takes 1.7 seconds. And doing the same for the 120. It's still going to be very quick, 7 shots at 1.85 seconds. So DPS of 1 mag with Cascade Point and bait and switch. For the 150 is going to be 322,000. Then with the 120, 303,000. So once again, points in favor for the 150 being higher DPS for Cascade Point. But the trade-off of Cascade plus bait and switch is you're giving up a perk that avoids reloading in the left. So for this, you definitely need to take advantage more so of your build and different combos like that. On Warlock, I usually just go with Rain of Fire to avoid reloading with all my weapons, and the rotation looks a little bit like this. With the 150, you can actually shoot off 3 entire mags of Cascade Point under bait and switch, which is quite a lot. That's 24 shots, all under bait and switch, in like 11 seconds. It is incredibly high DPS. And you can do the same for the 120s. With the 120s, generally you have to reapply bait and switch after every other mag, so you can only shoot off 14 before you have to reapply bait and switch. But once again, these combos are more advanced. You have to take advantage of your build to avoid reloading. If you do start reloading, you just lose all the benefit of Cascade Point, and you may as well just run Envious Arsenal, auto loading wherever it is. So overall, the 2 god rolls are obviously by far Cascade Point and bait and switch, and Envious Arsenal plus bait and switch on this weapon. I would say Cascade Point, bait and switch is going to be the higher cap depending on you as a player, your character, your build, and the situation. But overall, the go-to is definitely going to be Envious Arsenal plus bait and switch. Just good for any character, any build, any combo. Makes a lot of sense with bait and switch, and will be the go-to role on this weapon, which leads me to farming for this GL in the dungeon, the first encounter. Still the same farm I showed off in the Energy GL video. But the issue is, as the community has been farming for this weapon, we have discovered that something called proximity perks is a real thing. And at this point, Bungie has confirmed it, or at least addressed it. We're not sure what they're going to do about it or how long that might take. But if you don't know anything about it, there's been a lot of people covering it really well, so I'm not going to go too far into it. If we just look at the perks on this weapon, for example, let's say Attrition Orbs, the most likely combo you're going to get is be Chain Reaction, because it's parallel right next to Attrition Orbs in the API. But as you go further away from the weapon in terms of distance in the order that the perks show up, so for example, once again, Attrition Orbs and Chain Reaction are 0 distance away, they're right next to each other. But then if you go distance of 1 with Surrounded and Explosive Light, that's going to be the next likely 2 perks to roll with Attrition Orbs. And as you move further and further away, it becomes less and less likely. And the top and bottom connect, so it's like a circle. So as you get further away, you actually start becoming closer because it wraps around to the bottom or the top, which leads to the distribution of combos not being the same. Some combinations of perks are 10s, if not almost 100 times harder to acquire than others. And it just turns out that Envious Arsenal plus Bait Switch is one of the worst combos with max distance on this weapon, making it very hard to actually acquire, to the point where I am not going to actually farm anymore until they address it, fix it, or do something, because I already have Cascade, Bait Switch on this weapon. I already have the role I want on the Energy Gel and the Fusion, so I'm just farming for Envious Bait Switch at this point. And with it being like a 1 in 450 or whatever the number is, and these GLs don't even drop that often compared to the other 5 weapons in the pool, for me, I'm just gonna draw the line and just not farm anymore. As a Warlock player, I don't mind Cascade anyways with Rain of Fire, so I'm just gonna take a break, and maybe once they change something and address it or whatever, I'll be back. But one thing I will say about this topic that has annoyed me a lot is people using this to push their agenda or their opinion about crafting, which really has nothing to do with this conversation. There's people that are like, oh, well, this is what happens when there's no crafting in the game. And that is just not even the conversation. We're talking about our random rolls not truly being random and different combinations being way harder to farm than others, to the point where it's literally impossible to actually acquire. That has nothing to do with there being crafting or not. So yeah, that's one thing that's been kind of frustrating me. This video is already pretty long, so I'm not going to go too much more into it. Anyways, let me know what you think about the whole proximity perk thing going on down below. I don't think Bungie did it intentionally at all, and definitely not malicious, because if you think about it, this probably benefited the players as often as it hurt the players. This is definitely the case where it's greatly hurting us. I'm sure there's been as many, if not more, cases where it's actually benefited the player, making the God roll way easier to acquire. So it goes both ways. And yeah, let me know what you think about this video as well. Like usual, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.